Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Friday, March 17th, 2023, a very special day for my co-host on Fridays. Hailing from east of Woodward, I'm J.R. Stays.
And I am Devon O'Reilly. Jared, you couldn't have picked a better day to talk to me. It is St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
I know that this holiday is very close to your heart. I can sense that you're in the spirit, and maybe, although not traditional for St. Patrick's Day, I also sense you might be in the spirits.
Well, a little bit. We're not into Devon's spirits just yet. I want to talk to you, Jared. I want to have a good conversation with you. But yes, my favorite holiday of the year, St. Patrick's Day. There's a lot to celebrate with St. Patrick's Day. There's obviously the traditions of why it happened, of St. Patrick bringing Catholicism to Ireland and using the shamrock to teach that. But we won't get into all that. It's also a time for great booze and great food and hanging out with friends. And so it's a really favorite holiday of mine. Obviously, Devon Patrick O'Reilly celebrates with all the bells and whistles.
Yeah. I've always wanted to kind of ask you, Devon, obviously there's the name, but what really makes you embrace this holiday so much? Because we have been friends for years, and I know that maybe outside of Christmas, this is the biggest holiday of the year for you.
Well, I mean, in some ways, it is the biggest holiday of the year. I feel like everyone's grabbed Christmas. So we all know Christmas is great, sure. But I don't actually, traditionally, I haven't actually enjoyed Christmas Day for quite a long time since I was a kid. I mean, you open some presents and then you go to eat at someone's house, and that's fine. But it's in the middle of December. St. Patrick's Day to me represents the beginning of spring. And I know we don't have the best forecast. It's not like it was last year when it was 70 and sunny. But it's going to be in the 50s. So that's something. I think, it represents the beginning of spring, the beginning of things to come here in Michigan and in the Detroit area. Obviously, there's a lot of revelry, a lot of getting together with friends, making new friends, meeting people, eating, drinking, listening to music. It's kind of all the fun stuff that is just good community and getting together with people, sharing a drink, sharing some food. How could you not love that?
I get that. One thing I've noticed as I've gotten a little bit older, and this is kind of a difference between maybe me in my 20s and me in the geriatric millennial zone, is that, frankly, I don't see Irish bars as much as I did. It's not something that I see a lot of new of. And so I kind of want to go back on that and talk a little bit about what makes a good Irish bar. Because a lot of places they'll stick a shamrock on the door. But what makes a good Irish bar? And then the fate of Irish bars in general, because I don't feel like it's a concept that new ones get rolled out. We do all this food coverage, right? And I don't usually see that in the rundown.
Yeah, basically the way I see it in my experience is bars that don't really have a concept or don't really have a theme will just tend to gravitate towards Irish bars because that's what people associate Irish with bars. So like you said, you'll see some kind of half-assed shamrocks on the wall or some bar mirrors of Guinness. If you Google Detroit Irish bars, which I did, Jer, before this, just to kind of get an idea, there's all sorts of bars that, nothing against them, but you and I would never in a million years consider them Irish. So I think that where we're at now is the first couple characteristics of an Irish bar to me are old, kind of historic, dark type of places. And, they're not making a lot of those new ones. No one's building new Irish bars. Or if they are, there's some kind of a Chuck E. Cheese Irish bar BS, Unfortunately, we're at this point where Irish bars have existed, and there were so many of them. They were proliferated all over the region, the state. But now, as they close, they're not really being replaced by Irish bars. So the only real good, authentic Irish bars are ones that are old, that still exist now. And unfortunately, that is literally it's an endangered species, so to speak.
Could you make a new Irish bar? You talk about old. Is it more of the vibe? Could you open up an Irish bar and say an older looking building that kind of gave you the same vibe? I'm trying to think of, there's a place in Birmingham that I'm thinking of off the top of my head.
Well, in Birmingham, they had Dick O'Dow's, but honestly, they took Dick O'Dow's, that was a pretty good Irish bar, and just turned it into a friggin' stock market bar and just, Birminghammed the crap out of it. So, frankly. So they ruined it.
Oh,
They
that's
ruined.
right. It's got a whole different name now.
Yeah, it's not Dicko Dow's. They ruined it as far as I'm concerned. I'll say that. Yeah, hopefully they're not going to try and sponsor the show anytime soon, Jared. But it's nothing wrong with the bar itself. It's a nice bar. They built a patio. I'm sure it fits the crowd, but totally done. It's not an Irish bar anymore. But you're right, Jerry. I think any would-be developers out there, listeners out there, you have to start with the historic bones. You could make an Irish bar now, but you'd have to find an old historic space, kind of a more cavernous or a hole-in-the-wall type of spot, and really lean into the historic architecture. Maybe, like some places have done around here, some of the different bars, I think of Detroit City Distillery, some of the Detroit Optimist Society places, they buy the bars from other places. So they have bars, old wooden bars with the nice mirrors and the wood carvings. They have them shipped in or they buy them from other bars. Then you're kind of creating history. That's the way to do an Irish bar.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the recent end of my dad's bar, which is the name of the bar, in case you're confused, over there on the east side on the Detroit-Grosse Pointe border. That was demolished. But on Instagram, I saw that they had sold off and shipped out the old bar. And, those kind of things, they just don't make them like that. Or if they do, it takes so much money and time that you really got to find those kind of pieces. Do you think this decline of this or the stagnation, do you think it's about the theme? Is the Irish theme less popular? Is it less grouped communities of Irish people? Because back in the day, we all know there were Corktown, literally Irish section of town. And more, it's kind of part of the diaspora. There are Irish people everywhere. I don't know. What do you think? A little column A, a little column B?
I know. I really don't think that, Jerry. I really don't. I mean, obviously the Irish diaspora is still so broad and wide. And, I married a Corrigan, so we kept it in the family, or O'Reilly Corrigan, and we didn't stray too far here. But there's so many Irish people or people of Irish heritage somewhere in their lineage. I don't think it's that at all, Jerry. What I do think it is, though, is that from a business perspective, true Irish bars, aren't really moneymakers because there's not a lot of great margins selling inexpensive beers, basically basic beers, your Guinnesses, your Murphy Stouts, and then shots of, Tully and Jameson and whatnot. There's not a lot of good margins there. So I think at the end of the day, Irish bar, you're not going to have expensive food. So I think maybe to its detriment now, what you're seeing is new places that open. We see it in Detroit. New places that open have high-end stuff, or there's places where they can upsell either on food or drinks or experience. Irish bars by design are very no frills, bare bones, basic stuff. And, that doesn't make any money, Jerry. If you had $500,000 and you wanted to make another $500,000, you probably wouldn't open an Irish bar, right? Because there's just not a lot of room to make $1 million opening an Irish bar. And I think that partially is the issue.
Well, I think it's kind of the difference between the hospitality and saloon culture. So you go back in Detroit's history, there used to be a very high percentage of saloons per person, for residents. And even into the, big auto plant days, it's a different kind of experience. Back then, the saloon keeper, I was doing some research on a project, and there was a school board president in Detroit back in the day that was also a saloon keeper. And it was something that was a hub of the community. Now it's much more of the hospitality industry experience instead of the guy at the corner owning the bar and he lives upstairs.
That's a great way to put it, Jer, to kind of picture it for listeners, is you can open an Irish bar and earn a decent living, but that doesn't seem to cut it anymore. What you can't do is open an Irish bar and become a millionaire or become, a restaurateur or a franchisor. You can't. That's just not how Irish bars work. And so I think that cultural change is definitely to the detriment of Irish bars. No one's hey, I want to make a decent living. I want to make $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year having my own Irish bar. I don't think a lot of people are saying that, unfortunately.
Right. Well, a lot of things were handed down through generations, and then there was also kind of maybe a left turn by the kids. They went and did something else, or, how we live is a little bit different. I think about bars like Abix in Southwest Detroit and the neighborhood that was, there still is a neighborhood around there, but you also know that over the years, there used to be a lot more people who live near places like that, or Nancy Whiskey, which was one of my favorite. We'll talk about it in a minute. But there was a day, and it's actually starting to turn back around. If you go through North Corktown, there's actually starting to be a lot more stuff. I remember back when I lived there versus today, how many more places are there, but it's nowhere near what it was when that place was built, right? Nowhere near the beginning of Nancy Whiskey or even any of its grocery store predecessors where people lived densely. They would go to the corner bar and they would walk a block or a couple of blocks or 3 blocks that is just isn't part of American culture except in a very few areas now.
No, you're right. The culture shift, the lack of density of living in those neighborhoods where you have that bar that you can just walk up to. I mean, I love that. I mean, I romanticize that culture. I love that. I miss even living where I live now, being able to walk up to Howell's Bar, for instance, which was a great kind of, again, semi-Irish, but they definitely were, a great Irish bar in my opinion. You don't have that anymore. So, when the culture changes like that, you lose a true Irish bar. So I think, Jer, we have to celebrate the ones that are still here. So you mentioned Nancy Whiskey's. I mean, that's a great place to start. 100-plus-year-old institution. Tullamore Dew was basically first introduced into Detroit through Nancy Whiskey's bar. So we'll talk about that. If you haven't been to Nancy Whiskey's, guess what? You get a free shot of Tullamore Dew if you show up there and tell them it's your first time.
I mean, supposedly, right? Like, I don't think they actually do that anymore. I think they got in trouble for that.
Well, I mean, hey, I guess it's been a while since it was my first time there, but I've taken a couple first timers there over the years, and they always honored it. I can't speak to what they do now, but suffice to say, Jer, that shot of Tullamore Dew, even if it isn't free these days, it's not expensive, all things considered.
No. And it's something that's kind of like warms you up for, especially if you're going to be doing like a little bit of a spring out and about. It's nice enough to sit on the patio, but it does help to get a little bit of warmth in you before you get into it if you're going to do like a little bit colder patio situation. Because I don't mind as long as it's sunny out and it's not like a freezing breeze. I like being outdoors. I'm a little crazy like that. They've actually built a really nice setup back there that, they've done a lot. In fact, I think they actually have like an old tree. I remember when the tree was a tree and not just like a carved into a bottle of whiskey. But yeah, that is an institution. Absolutely. Tin ceilings, all kinds of stories. That's one of them. What are some other places? Because, I'm going to defer it to you because you're the expert.
Well, again, it's a dying breed, but there are still some great examples. In Gaelic League, you can't talk about Irish bars in Corktown without the Gaelic League. I mean, they're just so authentic. Basically the money spent at Gaelic League goes to help the Irish Society in Detroit. And so that's a true cultural institution. Now, it's not a bar that's open all the time, but certainly around this time of year, you can go there. You could go there on St. Patrick's Day. You could go there on the parade day. You can go there on the weekends, and they have live music, traditional Irish music mostly. So Gaelic League has to be mentioned, of course, there on Michigan Avenue in Corktown. And then McShane's, relatively new as Irish bars go in Detroit, but they check the boxes of great food, great kind of company, friendly bartenders. They're open on all the big days. They've got a patio. You can go there and sample. They've got a great selection of Irish whiskeys. They have Irish beers. They don't have acid Jer. They do have a really good selection of kind of Irish staples of drinking.
I will mention, McShane's is not small.
No.
Not at all. And Gaelic League, honestly, like the front bar area is kind of small, but honestly, Gaelic League, which is technically a private membership club. So I think depending on the night or whatever, like it's good to make friends that are members of the Gaelic League. The actual outlet, like I've been there for a number of functions, and heck, I remember I actually even did Santarchy one year, dressed up as a Santa. But that place is not small. Like that's interesting about that because we talk about small and that is part of it, but those two places are actually pretty large.
They are. Well, they can fit the live music. They can really fill out for big days like St. Patrick's Day and Parade Day. So those are two great ones. And then, locally you have other places kind of a little bit outside of the city. A personal favorite of mine, I'll give you an east and a west, Jer, as the theme of our show here. On the west side in Dearborn, we have Kelly's on Telegraph there. You're kind of coming up on Carlisle and Telegraph. It's a great Irish bar. They redid it recently, but it was always an Irish bar, so they kind of upped the ante a little bit, really leaned into the Irish theme. It's a great spot, not too far from me. And then on the east side, I love Irish coffee over there in Grosse Pointe Farms, actually. The name says it all. And you get an Irish coffee at Irish Coffee. It's a great little east side spot when I venture out that way.
It's important to support these places. If you're somebody who's got a suggestion, maybe there's some place that we haven't thought of, maybe in your neck of the woods or some place you visited, or nominate for blessing by Mr. O'Reilly, Mr. Friday, as an official Irish bar. I want to hear from it. dailydetroit@gmail.com. I mean, this is something that means a lot to a lot of people,
Absolutely, Jerry. It means a lot to a lot of people, including me. So if you opened an Irish bar, I'd love to talk about it. If you'd love to open an Irish bar, like I said, it's hard to do, but I'm happy to be a free Irish bar consultant to any would-be bar owners.
It's like Jake Taffer, but not.
The opposite. I don't need a rescue, but I do have a vested interest in making your bar the best Irish bar, and you'll have at least one loyal customer.
So I've been around town a little bit, Devon. I wanted to share a place because we're actually working on a pretty neat collab where we're going to be doing, and if you follow us on Instagram, you already know this. I don't have all the details yet to release, but we are going to be doing more pizza coverage and Detroit style pizza coverage by popular demand, talking about so much that's happening in Metro Detroit around this, because, Detroit is a city that is exporting pizza to the world in so many ways, and so many people are passionate about it. And so a friend of the show that has actually written a book about it, Karen Dybus, we were chatting and recommended that I go to a place that I have not been to before, and I had to travel all the way downriver, which it's not South Detroit, because South Detroit is actually Windsor, right? Because that's how geographically this works. But I went down to Wyandotte, downtown Wyandotte, over on Bill Street. There is a place called Frank's Pizza. It's been around since the 50s. It's got some recently new owners, which actually I think I'm going to have on the show to talk about some stuff. But wow, what a Detroit style pizza that they kind of tooled up on the menu. I had no idea about what I was in for. And I was stunned, because it was oh, you need to check out some place, because everybody knows Buddy's and Shields and Louie's and Cloverly. Those are the pantheon, but there are so many other places that do Detroit style pizza. Not to knock any of the ones I just mentioned, but to try something in an area town I just didn't expect, I definitely was okay, I'm going to do this. And I don't want to say surprised, because I was in there okay, this is going to be interesting, but I was extremely pleased. And they even have a patio outside, which obviously it's cold, so I did not avail myself of it. But I'm sitting there going wow, this is a pizza spot that I think deserves a lot more attention, because it was good, man.
Well, we love Wyandotte, as we mentioned on the show, Jared. Lots of cool things there. I have not been to Frank's, so you were giving me something that I need to check out. I looked at the pictures. You sent some over. It looks like a real old school type of place, but they've kind of recently renovated a little bit, but kept the old school flavor. I'm really looking forward to trying it. As we said before, the Royal Oak of Downriver, or I think some listeners had another nickname.
Yeah. So I want to shout this out in there. It's actually in our listener mail. Listener Alex wrote in because he loves the show, said another great show. Alex wrote in with a nickname for Wyandotte. You want to hear it?
Okay, what do you got?
He calls it the People's Grosse Point.
Okay, the People's Grosse Point. All right, sure. It's a little more accessible, I suppose. But yeah, Grosse Point Park-ish in terms of the walkability. So I don't mind that.
Yeah, there's some beautiful houses around there. If you
on
cut
the water, depending
yeah.
on the Grosse Point. Again, Grosse Point Park, as beautiful as it is not right on the water like Wyandotte. So, you got to go to Grosse Point Shores to.
That's true, but there's some water there. But you know what? Those are really big houses. In Grosse Point, the houses by the water, those are the big ones. Like huge, ridiculous.
You can't basically walk to the water. Where in Wyandotte, you could throw a stone or whatever into the river there and be right on it. Whereas Grosse Point, you want to do that, you're probably trespassing in some millionaire's backyard.
Now, I understand, Devon, I saw this on Instagram, and I'm just going to shout it out. You got to finally go to a place you have not been able to go to for a long time in Midtown Detroit.
Yeah, it felt almost surreal, because if you went back and listened to some of our first shows, Jer, or even some of my first articles, which sounds crazy that I wrote for Daily Detroit, I would always say my favorite spot in the whole city of Detroit at the time was Great Lakes Coffee. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the location. I loved the ability to have, coffee, beer, cocktails, whatever, and meet people there. So Great Lakes was my favorite place. We don't need to go into what happened to them, but it was a rough few years.
For that spot, yeah.
Yeah, up until their demise there. But you know what? I was in the area today doing some other stuff for work, and I noticed they have a nice little kind of flower arch outside the window and the Red Hook sign. And I remember we talked about Red Hook going in there, and I thought, oh, well, look, they're open. So I popped in there. There was a good amount of people hanging out in what is now Red Hook. We won't call it Great Lakes anymore, right on Alexandrine and Woodward. And basically, it's the same Great Lakes space. It's still very sparse. It's almost like when you're moving into a new apartment or a new house and you don't have all your furniture yet, you don't have everything set up yet. It's still very sparse, very kind of basic menu, but the bones are there. There were people hanging out. There was a decent enough crowd for kind of midday, and it was really cool.
What was your coffee verdict?
It's good coffee. I mean, come on, if you've been to Red Hook, you've been to the Ferndale location or what have you, it's good coffee. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if it stands out. I'm not a coffee snob, so I just like a nice kind of dark, rich roast, which they had, and they were prompt with it. They have your basic coffee drinks, your lattes and things like that. Nothing super crazy, nothing out of the ordinary yet, but I think they're kind of easing into it. So it was good to see people were working there. That location lends itself to students. It lends itself to people who are kind of working from there, taking meetings there. There's a lot of table space, so it's not one of those like you're going to be cramped. I know the Red Hook in Ferndale is a little cramped there. It's not somewhere you might want to take a meeting. It's not somewhere you could assume that you'll always get a place to sit down at a table. But this one has enough tables, enough chairs. You can feel comfortable walking in, and you'll be able to have a seat, have a table. So, as someone who takes a lot of coffee meetings, it'll definitely be someplace that's on my radar soon. And I think maybe they'll get the booze program together, and maybe a phase 2 or 3.
That's something that, as I mentioned, this is something that they've confirmed with me that's down the line. But, liquor licenses and everything are a tricky and expensive process. So that's on the way, but the exact timeline is kind of up in the air. Well, I'm so glad that you're getting kind of that place back. I was talking with a friend of the show. We had coffee a couple weeks ago, and they loved Great Lakes coffee, especially when they lived in the city. They actually recently moved out to the western suburbs as well. And they really miss that old space, and they're not drinkers. So they're going to be really they're fine with they're excited about what's going to be in there now. And we met actually at a new place that had popped up on my radar, but I hadn't had a chance to visit, La Ventana, which is in
nice.
Eastern Market over on Gratiot, right across from the big meat market and everything there. It is a great corner space, very white and open, by paint and all that kind of stuff, but very busy space too. When I went there for a Saturday meeting, because this is when you run your own ship, you have meetings whenever people need meetings, right?
Right. No, exactly.
Hashtag entrepreneurship. But the vibe was great drinks, everything else. So, it was super great to be able to check that place out. And so it's another thing if you're looking for a place that's got some tables, it was definitely busy. So that's the other thing to note. If you're going to go there on a weekend, it's going to be humming. So yeah, I definitely am interested in that. It was definitely solid. I think a lot of the street parking over there. So plan accordingly, Park Detroit app, or if you're on the weekends, you can, I think there's some more open hours over there. But yeah, something to check out, and I'll link to the Instagram and all that.
Yeah, it's you can never have too many coffee shops. That's a great area over there in Gratiot, Eastern Market area. The space looks amazing. I've seen pictures. You've told me about it, so it's on my to-do list. Red Hook just was more convenient for me this week, but I will definitely check it out soon.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Devon, it is so good to talk to you as always every week. It's a fun time.
Always a pleasure, Jer, especially St. Patrick's Day. Do me a favor, play me off with some Irish music.
And that we will do, sir. As always, if you've got feedback for the show, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Thank you so much to our sponsors and members who keep this going. Local media requires local support to continue. Thank you so much to Paul for becoming a member this week. We greatly appreciate you. We have a new round, by the way, Devon. I need to go pick them up, but we have etched Daily Detroit glasses, a new round of them to send to members, which I'm very excited about.
Ooh, exciting stuff. I love it. It's high quality stuff, Jared.
Well, you got to do it right. That's something I learned in my last corporate job. You're going to do swag, do it right, have some fun with it. Anyway, that's enough for now. I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend in the Paris of the Midwest. I'm Jer Stays.
I'm Devon O'Reilly. Can we be the Dublin of the Midwest for today?
Okay, today we'll declare it the Dublin. Detroit, the Dublin of the Midwest. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.